Great. So at Xatori we make a couple of products. I'll just go into the products that we have right now, kind of explain what they are, and go from there. So basically we make the most used electric vehicle station finder out there, called PlugShare. We've had 130,000 downloads. It shows 13,000 stations across the U.S. and that's really our flagship product. Unfortunately, I was silly and didn't include a screenshot of the website where you can actually kind of see it. But especially here in the Bay Area, there's a lot of stations around. There's about 500 stations around the Bay Area. So one of the things we're kind of addressed with this company is, and this is a software company focused on electric vehicles as the niche, which has been a passion area of mine for a long time, is that there's two kind of big problems with plug-in vehicles in general right now. Is that the public perception is that they cost too much and that there isn't enough infrastructure. And those things are both untrue and are becoming more and more untrue every day. So in the last 6 months the price of plug-in vehicles has fallen significantly, and the infrastructure has really grown. And I'll show you that in a second. We have another product called Charge Manager, which is kind of gets into fleet stuff. I'll talk about that later. Basically what we do is we generate two different data streams, plug side data and car side data, and we package that into several different forms, which go to car makers on one side and also energy companies and fleets on the other side. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We've signed some large deals with Nissan and other OEMs that haven't been announced yet, both in promotional activities and in API licensing. So we license some of the station data. So basically, why we believe that those two things are false, the cost and the infrastructure are false, is that basically the price, there's this disruption happening, which is that the price to drive a mile is decreasing and decreasing. And electric vehicles really decrease that another step down. Not just, I need to stop saying electric vehicles, plug-in vehicles, because really plug-in vehicles gets you just as far as EVs as far as this cost per mile. And to give you an example, the most popular car in America is the Toyota Camry, the most popular sedan. These are some of the price economics around this. If you wanted to go lease one today, you can find a lease about in that range. And if you kind of normalize all of these for kind of the cost of the lease and for how many months and your down payment, what you end up with is a total cost of ownership, which includes maintenance, and a total cost to drive a mile. And what you see is there's just a big difference in fuel cost here. So we're getting down to the Leaf right now, and the Volt is actually very close. You can lease a Leaf now for less than $200 a month. That fits within the fuel cost of most other cars. So if you were to drive that Toyota Camry 1,000 miles or 1,500 miles, which is around the average of the U.S. driver, your cost for fuel would be in that $150 to $200 range. You could take that fuel cost and have a brand new EV, and the fuel to drive that EV, those same 1,000 miles, is about $30 to $40 worth of electricity if you only fueled it from your home. The other cool thing is that the infrastructure exists, and the 70% of the stations that are out there are free. So when you're charging outside of your house, oftentimes you're getting free electricity. So it's quite a benefit. I estimate I'd be spending about $20 a month to drive my red Nissan Leaf, which I hope wasn't being towed. Somebody made a joke earlier, so it's parked at the garage next door. One of the reasons we believe plug-ins are going to win is this is a graph of the first wave of hybrids, and it really took them like 5 years before they started to take off, and that was about when they got their second generation Prius came out. So this was about 99. I've kind of overlaid, two different time periods. And it wasn't really until the 7th and 8th year that there was really a demonstrable cost benefit to having a hybrid versus just greenness. And right now, we are ahead of that hybrid adoption with plug-ins in the first 2 years. We haven't hit the second generation of vehicles yet, and the cost competitiveness is already there, as demonstrated in the previous slide. And it's only getting better. So for an example, batteries are improving at about 15% a year, or put another way, it varies between 10 and 15%, but it's been very systematically about every 5 years the energy density has doubled. And you can check that number today by looking at what's in the lab today, and there are companies in the local area that have batteries that are in the lab that are twice as energy dense as what's in the cars right now. And it takes about 5 years to get that chemistry from a fairly far development process in the lab to into production. So what you're going to see 5 years, so right now a Tesla for $70,000 can go 330 miles on a charge. My prediction is that in 5 years that same Tesla is going to go 600 miles, or is going to cost half as much because the battery, or you're going to go 300 miles and pay half the price. So what's really cool is when you look at the Nissan Leaf or cars in similar, when you start getting into that 100, 200 mile range, you really start to meet most people's needs, and that cost is continually, the cost is already effective now and continually to drop. So that's my spiel on the cost is there today. So if you have friends who are thinking about EVs but they think the cost is too much, you know, the reality is it's not. So wake up. It's a really great time to buy a plug-in vehicle. The other thing is that when we started a year ago, well, almost 2 years ago now, there were only about 500 stations across the U.S. to charge your car, which was just too few. I mean, there were a bunch in our area, but there was only a few across the nation. Now, and this is in August of 2012, there were 11,000. Actually, today there's 13,000. So we're adding stations at 750 stations a month across the U.S., which was more stations than existed a year and a half ago. So it's a pretty incredible leap that we've seen in this infrastructure development. We're adding in the Bay Area about 25 to 50 stations a month, and California is planning to put in 200. It's kind of this complicated deal with NRG. They had to pay a fine for an Enron company that they bought, which had wronged the state, and so they're being forced to build 200 fast charging stations in the state. So, which would, you know, there's only about 10 right now, so that would be huge. So the infrastructure is really there right now, especially since about 80% of the time people are not charging outside of their home. And most people don't ever need to charge outside their home. It's more of a convenience. For example, I just drove from Palo Alto. I got here, I have 50% of my charge to drive from Palo Alto through traffic to Oakland, and I'm charging right now because I can, but if I couldn't charge, I could still drive home. So I have about a 100-mile range, and realistically I get about 90 miles. This is where people are using our app across the country. Right here, we have, this is just kind of an example of data that we gather from PlugShare, how many people are using it, what the breakdown of the stations are, all these different things. We can go in if people have specific questions. Green Charge, which I just touched on at the beginning, is the other side of our product, which is communicating directly with cars. And through that, we're able to see how many cars are charging at any given moment, and how many are plugged in and not charging, which is kind of exciting because we can actually, in most of the cars, we can actually tell them to start charging. Only a few of the cars we can tell them to stop charging. So we can do some interesting optimization. And the long-term goal, the long-term kind of vision for that is that as the market moves forward, we're going to start transitioning away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy. And the reason for that is the CapEx is fairly similar for building a bunch of wind farms or a big coal plant, but the operating, the fuel cost is basically zero. And the problem with renewable energy is that's intermittent, obviously, but if you have a bunch of load that is also intermittent but schedulable, and you have a bunch of intermittent supply, those two can balance each other out through the smart grid essentially, and software. These are the areas of the country that are a little more open to doing that because they're deregulated. One of the ways, kind of how we would do that is we would receive a signal, and we would vary how the car charges over time. Let's kind of put another way, and I'm not going to talk about the ancillary service market. So I'll leave it at that. This is PlugShare. This is Green Charge. The cool thing about Green Charge is it gives you real-time information on your car. So right now I can check and see that my car is, you know, plugged in and more than 50% charged. And if it wasn't, like in this case, it's plugged in but it's not charging. There's a little lightning bolt that shows up when it's charging. I can push an override and start it charging. Maybe it's not charging because I set a timer, or maybe it was full. If it was full, I could start the climate control. So we are working with current automakers who'd like to promote their product because it is a good time to buy an EV or a plug-in vehicle, and they have them. So we're doing promotional campaigns through PlugShare. So those are our first paying clients. We're also using, as paying clients, we have paying customers. We have charging makers who would like to promote their charging station on our app. And the reason that they're doing that is one of the things we found is that if you're thinking about buying a plug-in, the first thing you want to do is know, are there stations around me where I need to go? So you download an app that would show you that, and ours is the most popular one. So they download our app to see, and so now they're in a really good place to see an advertisement for a plug-in vehicle or a charging station, which they might need to purchase in the future. In the long run, we have several automakers signed up to actually who are licensing our API, and then in that case we get a charge or a monetary, whatever they pay us. Sorry, they pay us per car based on allowing access to our API to show the stations on their center console. But the problem with the OEM world is that it's very long, and I think Heidi kind of related to that. And so it took us a year to get our first contract, and we don't start getting paid on that contract until another year from now. So we signed that a few months ago. But we have almost all the major automakers in various stages of our pipeline along that route. So that's our company. We just are wrapping up a convertible note right now. We had an earlier convertible note last year that got us started, and now that we have revenue from a variety of major players, we're kind of, it's almost as much work to raise money as it is to bring in revenue, so we're obviously focusing on the revenue side.